The New York judge in the Donald Trump criminal case in New York has ordered Donald Trump to be sentenced on January 10th. We previously reported how Justice Merchan rejected Donald Trump's absolute immunity motion after the Supreme Court ruling. The next step was, will Donald Trump be sentenced? There were multiple proposals that were made. Trump just wanted the entire thing dismissed and for there not to be sentencing at all. Trump cited the supremacy clause. He made an alternative argument in just the interest of justice, dismissed the case using something in New York called Clayton factors. Well, Justice Merchan looked through it all and said, look, you were found guilty on 34 separate felony counts. There's no reason or justification in the law why we should dispose of the sentencing. We will be holding sentencing on January 10th. So that's the headline, but we here at the MeidasTouch Network and Legal AF need to dig a little bit deeper. It was an 18-page order by Justice Merchan. And when you get into the final section, which is part 9, which talks about the sentencing, while it does say finding no legal impediment to sentencing and recognizing that presidential immunity will likely attach once defendant takes his oath of office, it is incumbent upon the court to set this matter down for the imposition of sentencing prior to January 20th, 2025. He then goes on to talk about that it will be held on January 10th. Then going through the various proposals, though, to what sentencing will look like, Justice Merchan says, well, look, this is a very serious felony, and in normal circumstances, there could be incarceration, just given the fact that Donald Trump won the election. That doesn't seem like a feasible option. He also points out that even the district attorney's office that locking Donald Trump up while he's in office is not a feasible option. The judge goes through these other alternative options and then settles on something called an unconditional discharge, which basically means you're not going into actually a prison cell, but I need help understanding what it means. So there's nobody better to talk us through what this order means in an import than Karen Friedman Agnifilo, the former number 2 at the district attorney's office. Karen, you've been following this case every step of the way here at the MeidasTouch Network. Tell us what an unconditional discharge means. Tell us what you expect to happen on January 10th. Tell us about this order. Does it come as a surprise to you? Break it all down. The floor is yours, Karen.
So this is the last and final hurdle for Donald Trump because there was really just one remaining issue once Judge Merchan decided the presidential immunity motion. There was this one last motion, this Hail Mary motion that Donald Trump through his lawyers made, which was, as you said, these interest of justice factors, like please, please, please dismiss this because he won the presidency and it's the right thing to do. And we were just waiting for this one motion because this is the last hurdle before Donald Trump can be sentenced. Now, that's if somehow his lawyers don't run to the appellate courts and try to get what's called a stay of the sentence. That is possible still. So there's still that possibility if they try now that Hail Mary. Who knows if they'll grant it or not. But that's the one last impediment to sentencing that could happen if they can get and convince an appellate court to stay the sentencing that's supposed to occur a week from today. And so what will happen assuming there's no stay and assuming it goes to sentence, what will happen at this stage is there will be a sentencing hearing. Now, the judge has essentially already signaled what he's going to do in this decision, which is highly unusual, by the way. Normally, unless it's an agreed upon sentence that's been pre-negotiated, which you can do in New York State, federally, that is less common. Federally, the parties can't have an agreed upon sentence ahead of time with the court. In the New York State, that's very common. But after trial, that does not happen. After trial, what normally happens is the prosecution makes their pitch, the defense makes their pitch. You can do it orally, you can do it in writing, you can submit letters from the community, from victims of crime. You basically throw everything in there, and you essentially make your best case for why the judge should sentence someone to your position that you want them to do. That's what happens at a sentencing hearing. And then the judge takes all that into consideration and then pronounces sentence. Now, that is what will happen here. But what's unusual is the judge has already signaled what he's going to do. And what he says he's going to do is this thing in the law called an unconditional discharge. Now, let me explain to you what that is. And then I'll tell you how the sentencing is going to go. So a judge has to sentence you to something, right? There has to be finality in the case. And P.S., once defendant Trump is sentenced, he will be a convicted felon when he enters office. So even though he's been convicted by a jury in New York, until you are sentenced, you are not actually considered convicted or a convicted felon. So that's going to be a huge deal. He's going to be the first U.S. president to take office as a convicted felon. So a judge has to pronounce a sentence, and a judge has lots of options, right? It can be incarceration. It can be incarceration to prison, which is more than 1 year. It can be incarceration to jail, which is less than 1 year. He can give probation. He can also sentence to a conditional discharge. And a conditional discharge means there are certain conditions that have to be met. That can be community service. It can be a fine. It can be a temporary or an order of protection, right? Stay away from each other order. It can be any number of conditions that a judge wants to sentence you to. It could be don't get in any more trouble, don't get rearrested, whatever the conditions are, that would be imposed as part of a conditional discharge. If a judge is sentencing you to an unconditional discharge, what that means is there are literally no conditions, nothing. There's zero sentence, nothing. He gets no probation, no fine, no jail. There's no sort of, oh, I'm going to sentence you to prison time that you will serve later when you are done being president and this temporary immunity is lifted. Now, it will be very dissatisfying to some people that why is he getting away with an unconditional discharge? Zero conditions. Because in the normal course, with somebody who'd been held in contempt 10 times, who has a 34 count conviction, who literally stole the election, normally someone like him would get state prison time. But the judge is constrained. The judge cannot do that here because he won the election, and the Supremacy Clause does not allow him to put a single condition on Donald Trump when he takes office. None. There can be zero conditions because a state court judge cannot impose any condition on a federal, on someone who's going to have be president of the United States. And that is what the factor that Judge Merchan has taken into consideration and realizes. But the reason, although it will be somewhat dissatisfying for some people, I still think there's a silver lining, and that's as follows. A sentencing hearing is not nothing. At the sentencing hearing, the defendant will be arraigned for sentence, which just is told that he's been convicted of a crime, and are you ready? Yes, you are. And they turn to the government first, to the people, and they say, what do you have to say, people? And they will give an impassioned kind of speech, if you will, and really tell the court and put in perspective what this crime is, what the defendant did. It'll be, I think, it'll be something that will be really worth listening to and getting a transcript of, because it'll really solidify it's the place where you can kind of really give your this is why the defendant is what he did was bad, and who he is as a person, and what this means in context. You'll then, his lawyers, Trump's lawyers, he'll be given an opportunity to speak. And the lawyers will then give their impassioned argument about what they want. The defendant is also given an opportunity to speak. So it'll be interesting to see if Donald Trump will say anything and make a plea to the judge and what he'll say. But the thing that I'm waiting for is I want to hear what Judge Merchan has to say, because Judge Merchan is, I think, just a really great judge. and has a way with words. And he is going to, I think, give a speech for the ages. And it's not really a speech, but it's his pronouncement of sentence. And what he's going to say and has to say is going to be really worth listening to. And I think it's going to be very powerful. And I think that's important. For no other reason than just the history books, to have what this means in this context and who Donald Trump is. And I think that's going to be very, very important. And then he will take office 10 days later as a convicted felon.
There were a few options proposed to Justice Merchan. One of them was basically the Alabama rule, declaring essentially what you would do in the case where somebody is dead, and imposing like a sentence on a dead person that then they don't serve, but you actually pronounce the sentence, and then they obviously can't serve it. There was another proposal that you just press pause on the proceedings and then you address this in 2029. And ultimately, Karen, Justice Merchan came to the conclusion that what is needed is finality. It has to happen before January 20th. I have a solemn responsibility to the justice system to make it clear how serious these crimes were. And we're going to do that at sentencing in public. But the practical realities of federalism, the supremacy clause, and these issues is such that I'm constrained, but I'm not going to back down. I'm going to pronounce that Trump is a convicted felon at this sentencing. So, Karen, I appreciate you breaking down what an unconditional discharge is. It's a complicated area of the law. It's an area that, frankly, there's no one as much of an expert as you, given your role at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office before. Thanks as always. And everybody, make sure you hit subscribe here. We're on our way to 4 million subscribers, and you can check out more of our coverage at MeidasPlus.com. Thank you.
In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.